Thursday, I think he forced Brooklyn at 20 turnovers. I think Milwaukee had 23 turnovers this evening. Just talk about the aggressiveness of your defense and how happy you are about the defense showing today.
Yeah, well, it starts at the point of attack, with McKeel tonight, Dyson as well. I think those guys, when you see that, everybody's got to raise their level some. You're looking at a guy working like that, it's something Gabe comes in and picks up. It's, everybody's trying to be, aggressive but also solid at the same time. I think that's really important. You don't want to be gambling. You just want to make people work.
Coach, it took an 8-point deficit into that half, but I'm curious for you, what do you think the guys sort of buckled down on in terms of that defensive presence in the second half, especially that third quarter where you're able to get up?
Yeah. It's hard to win every quarter. And I thought the way that Milwaukee came out, the ball was moving, they were making us go side to side, and they played well. So I think the biggest thing, for our group is, there was probably 3 or 4 times that we switched and we were too soft, and Rollins rose up and hit a shot, and Porter got downhill. There were some things we needed to not adjust, but just do execute better. And I thought that happened more in the second half. And, when you have breakdowns, it's hard to build leads. And we cleaned up some of those breakdowns, gave ourselves a chance to score. I think maybe there was one possession, 2 possessions in the third quarter where we turned the ball over, and they were turnovers that they looked like they might end up with baskets. We had a few too many of those tonight where we didn't take advantage, but we got to the next play and were able to get a stop, and then I think we did score after that. So, that mental toughness and focus is what allows you to build a lead.
Coach, how much has putting McCollum in the starting lineup helped this winning streak, and what has he provided in your locker room, just in general?
Well, the locker room, really CJ's, I think since he's been here, he's at the forefront of it as far as, leadership. We have a lot of guys that, they're willing to talk to each other, and guys that are willing to listen. And I think CJ's presence, when we say talk to each other, sometimes we equate that to getting on a guy, yelling, and sometimes that's the case. But we've got productive conversations that are going on, whether it's Gabe, CJ, of course, a few of the guys that are vets in this league that understand what it takes to win, because it's a hard league. CJ probably may have had his most efficient game tonight, so some of it for him is leading by example. When he's got an opportunity to rise up and shoot a 3 in transition, or there's a pick and roll and he's got an open shot, and then the other times where he's been willing to get off the ball, and I think that's that makes his voice even stronger and more credible when we're talking about playing with the pass. So good to have that presence in the locker room.
So, Coach, before the All-Star break, you guys owned a 42% rebound percentage as a team. Since the All-Star break, it's now jumped up to 55%. That's the second best in the NBA. You guys also seem to be crashing the boards a lot more, especially offensively. What adjustments or emphasis have you and your staff made that have led to this kind of turnaround?
Yeah, that's the emphasis. Is I think this is a different team. Half of the players are different, so it's hard for us this year to compare teams to teams. That said, in addition to having some adjustments, we have a lot of our core guys that have been here, whether it's JJ, McKeel, Dyson, Onyeka, those guys are giving themselves up. And they're doing things, I guess the best way, I think we're doing things collectively. There's no one player that's crashing, it's multiple guys crashing. There's no one player that's rebounding, it's multiple guys, being physical and getting bodies on people. Onyeka maybe as much as anybody. You know, he gives up a lot. JJ should take him to dinner because he's keeping his guy off the glass. And I think there's also some habits where we were walking into the rim, the ball's going over our heads, and some of those things, just being more disciplined on things that we've worked on. But over the course of the season, I think, you absorb things over time, and particularly when either you're not executing when you're not doing it, or when you have some success doing it. A lot of times it gets momentum, and I think that's occurred. Okay.